quickly. Wonderful. Right. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have an hour and a half for the session today, and you've joined the community-led open mapping solutions. You'll hear from a few speakers from the tech team, but I'm really glad to have you here. And I really hope that after this session, you walk through this open mapping journey and you will have an understanding about the different tools involved. So what we have planned for today, we'll start with a little icebreaker for around 10 minutes, and then we'll hear from our speakers about why it matters to have a community-led open mapping solutions. And then we'll talk through the different tools and the different tools that you can use as part of that open mapping journey. So we really hope that in these sessions you'll learn more, but we'll also learn from you of where there are gaps in which you might need support, and also for specific tools. So the first thing we'll start, so we just warm up in the interactive part of the session, is let's go to Menti, where we'll go through a very short icebreaker just to see where you're joining us from, also on expectations from the session, to make sure we have all that covered during the session. So if people can start joining in, you can join in by scanning the code, or I've just shared in the chat the Menti, so you can see the code and go from there. I'll start it now from here. Great. So I'll be able to see if you are joining us, or I'll get a little like thumbs up. So let's see if we get a few more people to join us, and we'll spend the next 5 minutes just warming up, starting the session before you hear a lot more from the speakers today. Okay, thank you, Amran, for sharing that. Okay, so let's see the first. We have, I think, 5 questions in this first section. So let's see. We already said hello in the chat and where you're joining us from. So if you can click on the map and add where you're joining us from or where you feel most at home, that will be great. So we see how many participants we have from different parts of the world. All right, very early on for people in the US. Great. Great.
Manage.
Yeah.
Just mute if anyone's. Okay, that is great. Let's see a bit more. Okay, I think this is, I would say, one of the best so far in terms of spread of different places. So thank you so much for joining us. If you just join us, we're in the Menti saying hello and just where we feel most at home. All right. A few more people, that's great. I'm going to move to the next one just as we start. Oh, I love this. I'm going to take a screenshot and share it after the webinar as well. Okay. So the next one is, how are you feeling? Is everyone tired, caffeinated, or you just with a lot of energy in your day? You can add an emoji. We've done this before, or just say how you're feeling. Like, I want to get a sense of, everyone's curious, excited, tired. Maybe it's the end of your day. We saw this in different sessions. Great. Energized, amazing. Sleepy. Good. All right. Okay. Wonderful. Love the work. Happy. I'm loving the positivity. So wonderful. Okay. Next one, 3 more questions. Hopefully that'll warm you up and then you hear all these exciting things that you're here for. So we've not done this before, but I was participating in different sessions around language and diversity. And I would love it if you all can, maybe on your phone, you also have the different keyboards to type in other languages and say hello. I'll try not to, I'm not aiming to pronounce all of them, but nice to see. All right. Lugan, yeah, new ones. I know Ola. Terve. Oh, I love this. Okay, some that I won't be able to read, but thank you for participating. Great. Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful. Great. I know more people have just joined us, so we're in the Menti and say hello in different languages. Learning for me as well. Kuzu. I'll try. Next step is learning how to pronounce them all. Okay. So now jumping into what we're all here for, I would love to, first thing that comes to mind. So I know it's a broad concept that we talk about the open mapping solutions that you hear now from start to end. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Maybe it's confusion, maybe it's specific to easy. Great. Okay. First thing that, you all register for this webinar, but you all have probably different understanding or different thoughts of like what that is. OSM, yeah. Yeah. So it's related to OpenStreetMap and easy to use, a chance to learn, free. Okay. Data that's available to everybody. Great. Open source, specific tools. Wonderful. Okay, what else? First thing, don't think too much maybe about that. From design to so to collection, analysis, utilization, sharing. Wonderful. Some things we are definitely covering. So I'm happy they're coming up. Open data, data collection, community engagement, all parts of it. Freedom. Yeah, Q just coming. It's a bit. Yeah, I love the words as well. Freedom, technology, field mapping, non-commercial, community-driven. Yes, we'll cover a lot of that. So thank you for engaging and adding, yeah, parts of your first reflections. Okay. So you've mentioned a few of those things, and we'll cover some of that. But in broad terms, some of you, you'll have different background. We don't all know you. And maybe you are mapping, maybe you're new to this, maybe you're using maps. Where do you currently see a gap in your mapping journey, whatever you are part of that? So the first one where I added imagery, I'm speaking about, aerial imagery, whether that's collecting that, processing, using like any of that. Broad terms on purpose, we've left them in there. But yeah, just from your perspective, love to see where you see a gap, and maybe in shortly we can address some of those gaps. Okay, I'll wait a few more people to add responses. Where do you currently in your mapping journey? The way that you see the journey. Thank you all for engaging. That's really, yeah, really good, and hopefully it's also a sense of that community. Okay, right. So imagery, data collection field, AI assisted mapping. Okay. And last question, and then we go into hearing exciting things. Okay, 20 people just join us. All right, imagery. Yeah, I was expecting some areas to have maybe more people identifying as gaps. So this is really useful. Hopefully by the end of the session, we could address some of those and kind of speak about the challenges. Okay, last one, and then you're going into hearing from our wonderful speakers today. So you hear about different solutions, and you also hear about different tools. So here, I would love for you to just add any tools you currently use, or maybe you know of. Name any tools. There's so many in the open source ecosystem, and we'll talk about a few. But yeah, anything. Like you can add as many as you want. So please add that. I think it's important to think of this ecosystem of tools when we talk about solutions. So you hear in detail today about some, but there are many available. Okay, so we see QGIS, JOSM, okay, Google Map, Open Aerial Map, OSM chat, some mobile, so editors, great, some mobile applications, Ganix Map, Vespucci, What else? Maybe that's a way for you to learn about some new tools as well. Not new, but new to you. Okay, wonderful. So we go back to Menti at the very end. So remember, maybe think of what are the gaps that you mentioned. Now you hear the presentation. We'll go back at the end as well to the Menti to speak a bit about that. So moving back to our presentation, let me just do the slideshow. Talk just about the agenda. We went through the quick icebreaker. And all of us today presenting, we're part of the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. And you probably know that our main mission, as you can see on the slides, is that local community source map data. That's why we're talking about community-led open mapping solutions, that they're being accessible and they're being utilized. So all of you hopefully joining this session will be able to use them, and part of your mapping journey, you understand where to fit. I've just added first names here, and you see today, and you hear from all those people from our tech team. So Ramia, Emmy, Omran, myself as a facilitator, Ivan, and Sam. So just adding briefly their photos, and you hear from them in just a second. Okay, so first thing starting with, and I think we have Ivan, if I'm not mistaken, who is very early on for him, but we want to start before going in detail as to why this matters. Why are we talking about this whole journey, and why is it important to have a community-led open mapping solution? So let me see. Ivan, over to you.
Hey, good morning. It's 4 a.m. here in California where I am. So why is it important for mapping to be open? Well, I'm going to make the case today that, hey, Petty, can you hear me properly?
Yes, I can. Sorry. Yes, go ahead, Ivan.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to make the case today that this is first and foremost a question of justice. It's a question of equity. It's a question of whether actually mapping is something that serves people, and whether it serves people in their own homes, in a way that is fair and equitable and just. So think about the tools that we use, for example, to gather imagery. So we know since the inception of OpenStreetMap, for the most part, what we've used is satellite imagery. Okay, who gathers satellite imagery? Well, not to put too fine a point on it, people who have satellites. Who has satellites? Local communities? No. Governments. Major corporations. Which governments? Governments of poor countries? No. Governments of wealthy countries. Mainly driven by, in fact, military technology and concerns. Okay. So where is the satellite imagery that we have access to good? In Democratic Republic of the Congo, for example? For the most part, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo or Bangladesh or Chile, the satellite imagery that we get is out of date. It's low resolution. It's not sufficiently recent because we only gather imagery when a satellite happens to be overhead, and we have the inclination and the time and the money to process the imagery. Whereas in New York, London, Tokyo, Berlin, the imagery is usually of decent resolution. It's recent. It's refreshed frequently. So it's another example of the digital divide, where people from wealthy countries are visible. People from wealthy countries are counted. They're seen. They're on the map. We actually use the phrase to be on the map or to put something on the map, to indicate paying attention to them. We'll say, this is an event that will put, the Olympics will put Los Angeles on the map. What does that mean? It means to be seen, to be understood, to matter. Because to be seen on the map is something of an acknowledgement that we exist. And we use that phrase to put something on the map as a sort of acknowledgement of that the map and the detail of the map and the resolution of the map is in some way an indication of how much we care about a thing. And if we're to look at the global map of the data that exists both commercially in something like Google Earth or in open terms in something like OpenStreetMap, we see a huge disparity. Well, in terms of Google Maps, the location of the nearest Starbucks is commercially valuable information in Manhattan and Tokyo and Berlin. And therefore, Google, the company, spends a great deal of money and a great deal of effort ensuring that those places are well mapped. And in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the location of the nearest Starbucks isn't such commercially valuable information because the people in Kinshasa don't actually have the money to be spent for it to be worth targeting them with ads. So what we'll see is that while Google Earth almost certainly has an edge, primarily because they have such good imagery in places like Manhattan, in rural Africa, South America, South Asia, Southeast Asia, the commercial maps are often very low in detail. The available imagery is poor. Whereas OpenStreetMap, because it's actually built by communities and many of the other open products, Open Aerial Map, for example, there is more detail in areas. So that's another example of a disparity where in a kind of infrastructure that we take for granted in the wealthy world, i.e. to be on the map, to have data, to be able to navigate, to be able to deliver packages, to be able to find a hospital, to know how many people live in a given area for the purposes of creating voting districts. All of these things we take for granted in wealthy countries. And if we're to have them everywhere, if everyone is to be on the map, to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be known, to exist and to have rights and to have needs, it's not going to be the big corporations and the governments of wealthy countries who will lead. It must be the communities. So to return to my example of imagery, if the imagery that we want to use is generated by, for example, small drones, small drones are accessible to communities, even in poor countries, even in places where they don't have a lot of money, even in places where the location of the nearest Starbucks is not commercially valuable information. And we can see that if we look, for example, today in Freetown, Sierra Leone, Monrovia, Liberia, Accra, Bali, Indonesia, Nepal, Kathmandu, we see that in, for example, Open Aerial Map, there's drone imagery of extraordinarily high quality resolution, and it's actually made by and for the communities themselves. It can be used even for such things as assessing land tenure and occupancy and land rights, something that is of tremendous concern. There are 2 billion people in the world who don't actually have a properly surveyed cadastral map of their own land. Something, again, we take for granted in the wealthy world. So the moment a community, yes.
Give a second to maybe here because I will hear more from Ivan about imagery. So I'll move into a second, maybe into that, unless there was something else you wanted to add, Ivan. And I think it would be good to speak specifically in a second about aerial imagery, maybe a bit about the drone tasking manager in a second. Um, before we move to that, what I've like added on this slide, and then we go into the aerial imagery. So you saw very briefly, and I think you heard now from Ivan of the reasoning and the why, which is really important. And we speak a lot about this open mapping journey, the story, and you see on these slide, all the way from imagery to to using that map. And I think Ivan just started speaking about specifically about imagery. You hear from all of our speakers today about this whole journey, and they were participating, and you can see on this slide in projects that took place. I even just used the example, Sierra Leone, Nepal, Argentina, addressing these gaps with the community. So there are a few like stories as well. We'll share the slides that you can take a look at. But what will guide you now through step by step, and I'll move back to Ivan in a second, is seeing all these different steps or all these kind of maybe gaps that we're talking that um, we're addressing through these open technologies. And I'll move back, to you, Ivan, as we start. We'll go through each one of those from aerial imagery all the way to, being able to download a map and use it. And I think Amy from our team was saying how from, starting from nothing to actually having a maps that is being used. So the first step of that is really addressing that kind of gap of community-led like tools and just accessibility for that aerial imagery. So Ivan, maybe briefly now you can go back now to that part about talking about open aerial map as well as the kind of drone tasking manager and anything else you'd like to add from now on.
Sure. Sorry, I often go on at great length. But this is really important to me, and it's dear to my heart, this idea that community-led mapping not only creates better data, but it creates a better world, better justice. Okay, so again, the question of imagery. In March of 2023, Maxar, the company formerly known as Digital Globe, revoked access for their satellite imagery to be used by humanitarian mappers. And so, since 2012, we had been mapping from satellite imagery, primarily from Bing. Since 2016, we'd been using imagery from Maxar. So we'd gotten used to having just about the best possible civilian satellite imagery available. 30 centimeter resolution, quite often reasonable vintage, not too old. The same problems applied of, the poorer countries and the less important places in the views of the companies and countries that operate the satellites were going to be less recent and less high resolution. But in 2023, we suddenly had this regression where we went from, in most places, having 30 centimeter for satellite imagery to having only Bing that we're allowed to digitize from. And quite often you can look at Google, look at Bing, look at Maxar, and the least high resolution of the three and the least recent of the three is the only one we're allowed to use. So we're not allowed to use the best satellite imagery that's even visible for ordinary civilians. We can see it, but we can't digitize from it. It's not allowed. So it's been a slow rolling catastrophe in which the humanitarian mapping world has grown accustomed to being able to digitize, for example, buildings to reasonable accuracy. We couldn't do that anymore as of March 2023. So it's time to move forward. It's time to take back the means of producing imagery for communities. And broadly speaking, the way to do that, there's ground-based cameras that you can use, and there's things like balloons and kites, and there's even a good friend of mine is looking at how a community of volunteer pilots around the world can actually fly, piloted aircraft with a camera strapped on the bottom of them. And we're doing some experiments with that right now. But broadly speaking, it's inexpensive drones that offer the hope for communities to generate high quality imagery for themselves. So we're looking at, both creating the software, and you see there's a picture on the left of the drone tasking manager that actually generates not just flight plans, because there are, commercial softwares like Pittsburgh Capture and Leachy and Drone Deploy that can generate flight plans, but the drone tasking manager is free for everyone. You can even see it at dronetm.org. Um, it's not completely ready yet, but it's already available to the public as a sort of beta test. This allows us to actually create flight plans on inexpensive drones. When I say inexpensive drones, I mean something on the order of $750 or $1,000, which is, of course, not something that an ordinary civilian in the Congo can afford. But compared to what's often used, the $20,000 SenseFly EB, the $25,000 Wingtra 1, the minimum $8,000 DJI Matrice, or even the enterprise drones, consumer drones from DJI that are $3,500. These are not even readily accessible for an association or an organization or an NGO in low-income countries. Whereas a $750 DJI Mini 4 Pro, for example, this is something that a small NGO in Africa can afford. A community can get their hands on. So we've actually gone out of our way, even despite the manufacturer DJI not being really keen on us using their low-cost drones for mapping. They want us to buy the expensive ones. So they don't provide the software development kit for people to make mapping software that works on these inexpensive drones. Well, we've found a way, despite not, none of the commercial softwares can work with, for example, the DJI Mini 4 Pro, the sort of flagship inexpensive drone made by DJI, because they don't want us to map with it. They want us to buy the more expensive one. Well, we have hacked the system, and the Drone TM actually creates flight plans that can be uploaded into the DJI Mini 4 Pro and several other very inexpensive drones.
Well,
And so
this
this
even made
actually,
me want to ask. I'll ask one thing. A lot of people said there is a gap in the poll at the start in imagery. So as you speak about the drone TM and why, it's being developed, if there's one thing you can, ask people to take away or do as they hear what you're just explaining.
that would be, my takeaway would be communities can do it. It is
Mhm.
possible to use low-cost drones. The example I often use is that a SenseFly EB costs $20,000, and you can cover 20 square kilometers a day at 5 centimeter resolution with it. Well, a DJI Mini 4 Pro costs $750, and you can cover 2 square kilometers a day. So, in fact, for the price of one Swiss-made mapping drone that covers 20 square kilometers a day, you can buy 25 DJI drones and cover 50 square kilometers a day while employing 25 local people. Now, obviously, if, as the drone industry tends to assume, it's going to be a European, some expensive rich person flying the drone, then of course you need one that can cover a large area, because the expense of, the actual labor is your primary expense. But if you imagine that it's underemployed and underutilized, but brilliant African or Latin American or Asian youth who are doing it, who don't have a lot of economic opportunities, suddenly it becomes sensible to buy a great many smaller, less expensive drones. So the economics of the whole sector depend upon, the cost of the local labor market. And in poorer countries, in vulnerable countries, in hot priority countries, it makes sense to use inexpensive drones. So that is something that the industry hasn't responded to. And as a community, we are responding to that. And the idea is power to the people. Again, it's justice. Why should it be
Thank
European consultants earning the money from drone surveying contracts? We're also working on our own drone. We have a $250,000 from an entity called Grand Challenges Canada to actually design and build a community mapping drone that's open hardware, that's available to everyone, that can be made and manufactured for less than $1,000, that's actually optimized for mapping. So more news on that as we go along. But the gap in being able to produce imagery is the thing that I am working most hard. I mean, that's the focus of most of my work nowadays, is trying to close that
you.
gap in imagery, as well as some other
Thank
field
you,
mapping tools.
Ivan. Maybe I'll stop here so we hear from the others, but I think I would like the one takeaway of those of you, because you all have different backgrounds, different maybe projects you're working on, is that it is possible. It's something we're working on now. Ivan and we work with NAXA as well on this, specifically on this project. But if you have questions and you want to find out more, hopefully this gives you a bit of a glimpse of what is being developed. And we'll have another follow-on session in December. But if it's first time hearing about the drone tasking manager and you think it's something that you can make use of, click on the link and yeah, stay in touch. That's the main aim. So as we'll talk, we'll go to the next speaker. And I hopefully you're following this journey. So hopefully we're keeping you on board of why it matters, starting with addressing this gap of related to imagery and the cost of it that Ivan spoke a lot about. We spoke about the drone TM. So now we'll move to the next step, right? Once you have collected that imagery, what is possible that's again community-led and accessible to all in terms of the next step of the journey, which is remote mapping. So Ramia, I'll hand over to you now to briefly speak about this part of the open mapping kind of journey and solution.
Okay. Thank you, Petya. Thanks, Ivan. Thanks, Ivan, for setting the stage. Yeah. We had Ivan just talk about how do we generate imagery ourselves as a community using low-cost drones. Now, the step after you have these imagery would be processing. You process the images, stitch it together or bring it together as one output file, which can then be used as your reference for any further digitization. I see most of you are familiar with the idea of OpenStreetMap or in general mapping in the open space. So I'm sure you must have used satellite imagery as your reference for any remote mapping needs. You must have been able to identify buildings, highways from this imagery. Similarly, after you generate this image, the drone imagery, here in our workflow as well, we are thinking about digitization. And naturally, we are thinking about the tasking manager here. And the tool has been, and we have been using the tool for close to like 5 to 6 years now for generating a lot of data for OpenStreetMap. So the imagery that you generate with drones, which is processed, is hosted on Open Aerial Map. So anybody who has this imagery output generated and processed can upload this to Open Aerial Map platform. And from there, you'll be able to generate a link for the final output, which is then used as your reference on the tasking manager. So on Tasking Manager, we let communities or organizations set up mapping projects for areas of interest. And while you set up this project, you can provide, okay, so this is the imagery that I want to use for mapping out this area. So the only catch here would be the imagery has to be open source or available for anyone to use it in open. Rather than like this commercial satellite imagery. So that is the only license clause under OAM. But I'm sure like when we are doing it as a community, since we are talking about the open mapping, that's naturally emphasized. Yeah. The process with Tasking Manager is the same as the rest of the projects. And we have tried out this digitization exercise with the drone imagery outputs across several geographies. I had a chance to test it out in Indonesia. Many of the data that we have been generating, or all the data that we have been generating using Tasking Manager goes to OpenStreetMap. We are also thinking about having this data flow into a different database in a sandbox-like setup instead of directly uploading it to OpenStreetMap. Because in some of the cases, I see there is a requirement to generate drone imagery and subsequently digitize it and use it for other purposes rather than like putting it onto OpenStreetMap. This could be used for like further analysis or generating your own atlas. So that is also possible. And we have a small test setup for tasking manager. And we are talking to MSF team who have a similar case where they're generating drone imagery, and then like they want to digitize the data using the imagery, but do not want the data already to go into OpenStreetMap. Rather, have it in other environment, validate it, do further analysis, and generate other atlases. So we are considering this use case to be integrated directly into the tasking manager, where you set up mapping projects for data to be digitized without going into the OpenStreetMap database. This is on the roadmap for the tasking manager tool, and it will be implemented sometime next year. I'm also happy to learn more about other use cases uh, from everyone else here. And if you have a workflow where this data has to go outside the OpenStreetMap environment, please let us know. We'll talk more about it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so hopefully you're still with us, following along on this journey. So we talked about the drone tasking manager, open aerial map, right? Having the imagery, and then using that imagery to then create and add data, as Ramya was talking about, using the tasking manager. So tasking manager being another enabler in that journey. And then we go into the next part of the journey where we speak about the AI assisted mapping, and our person for that will be Omran, who tell you a bit more of this part of the journey. So over to you, Omran.
Thank you, Petya. Reflecting back on what Ivan and Ramya mentioned, you would notice that there is massive amount of drone imagery that's coming soon. If the community are leading, the community are massive amount of numbers if compared with the number of providers for the imagery, for satellite imagery. Plus, it's more frequent, meaning people could run and communities could run their drone, fly their drones more frequently than how satellite imagery would go over a specific area. And there will be always more changes to those areas. So remote mapping, which is the next step what Ramya talked about, is already currently manual. And we're thinking of how we could amplify the efforts of volunteers to accelerate the mapping, to amplify the efforts of the mapping. So we came up with the FAIR idea, which is an AI assisted mapping, where we're trying to amplify the efforts in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. When I'm talking about efficiency, I'm more talking about maintaining the quality and having better even quality than manual mapping, and the effectiveness in terms of how the speed of mapping. Currently, we have couple amount of challenges. Training AI models will need some resources, online resources that is needed. Plus, the license to train some AI models is restricting us from training multiple options. And those are, if we're talking about satellite imagery. However, when we reach an area, it's more of a community-led and then an open source imagery, that will be even, the license will allow us to train much more models, localized models. And FAIR, we're trying to tackle three problems mainly in the ecosystem, the open mapping ecosystem. The openness, and this is somehow similar to the idea mentioned by Ivan earlier. Most of the models are not open source. The data might be open source in some cases, but the models themselves, how they were trained, what was the training data for them, and how did we reach that model or AI model, and as it is in the current state, is not always traceable back. We are interested in opening that black box, as AI as being seen as a black box. We are trying to open that black box and take a step further with the communities to see what's inside and what we can understand from that one. And another problem we're trying to tackle is the biases in the model. Whenever there is an AI model, it's mostly trained on the global north data. This is also back to the same idea that it's more wealthy, there are more available data, it's always available there. However, in the global south, it's not always the same for us. I mean, we're trying to be, I would admit that we are biased, but this time toward the global south, but we're trying to create that balance when we are biased toward the global south in this context. A third problem is having the human in the loop, where most AI somehow is trying to replace someone. While we don't believe in that idea that AI will be replacing the human, we're trying to amplify the efforts of the human. So we want to keep the human and the mappers and the volunteers at the center of our work, and then we want to make the AI assist them. I have an artist friend told me recently, it was like even in some of the memes, um, I would like to have the AI do the laundry so I can do my creative work, like artwork, and compare with AI is doing the artwork and she's doing the laundry. And that's like how we also see it in this context. Um, Fair is currently in a production environment. You could see it on the link fair.osm.org. We're welcoming tests, we're doing some evaluations, and we're also refactoring the user experience. It should be also deployed by the end of the year with a um, new user experience. You're welcome to follow us everywhere. And then we'll hand it over back to you, Petya. You're muted.
Sorry, unmuting, unmuting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Omran. Again, we've shared also URLs for each of the tools or enablers, I'll call them, for each one of those steps. So we talked about imagery. Maybe at the end of the session, I'll quickly pick up on Open Aerial Map. I think we had a few questions there, so I'll go back to this at the end. We heard about remote mapping from using the tasking manager and using FAIR in the AI assisting mapping part. And the next step is the additional information. So we call it field mapping in broader terms, but allowing to add this local knowledge to the map that using the first, let's go 3 steps of that journey. So I'll hand over to Sam from our team who would tell you a bit more about field mapping and specifically one of the tools that we're also working on, the field mapping tasking manager. Over to you, Sam.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yep, nice. All right, so now we're at the point in the workflow where we have digitized geometries on a map. And as Petra said, we need to add extra information that adds value. You know, when you look at a typical, say, map produced by a government or, you know, I guess more in if you look at any map, basically, you will see there's obviously additional information attached. You need to know, is this building a residential building or commercial building? What material is it made from? I mean, that may be even more than a typical map would tell you. Things like how many stories the building is, how many people live here. This is all extra value that you can add to your map. So in the OSM world, this would be through OSM tags. Next slide, please, Petra. So FMTM is a coordination layer that's built on top of another tool owner called ODK, previously called Open Data Kit. Many of you might have heard of. It's very similar to things like Kobo, ONA, and other alternatives. So basically what FMTM does is it handles the task division. So if you've used Tasking Manager, you know, you need to subdivide into task areas, and I'll come back to this in a minute. It also handles the survey creation, so which questions you want to ask about the features on the map. And it also handles the coordination amongst the mappers, so they know who's mapping where and can effectively coordinate. Then ODK actually handles the survey, like the data collection in the field. Next slide, please. So ODK Collect is a very intuitive data collection tool. You can collect data in many different formats, including photos, GPS points, So you can design your survey to be any way that you want. It can also work fully offline, and it can sync when you return from the field, which is a really nice feature. Next slide, please. So one of the other key things for FMTM is the task splitting that I said I'll come back to. So it's quite different from Tasking Manager, where you just have basic squares, see when you're mapping remotely. But when we're in the field, we also need to account for other major barriers like highways, rivers, railways, things that can't be easily traversed. We also might need to factor in how many features a user may be able to handle within a task area. So they can map 5 buildings within a day. So we divide by 5 buildings per task. Or we may say have 10 enumerators, 10 mappers, and we want to subdivide the area into 10 tasks so that 10 mappers can go out and map their individual tasks. So yeah, FMTM is available at this URL shown here. And as opposed to Tasking Manager, where it's a fully collaborative, global thing, FMTM, I guess, is a bit more localized by its nature of being in the field. So it typically involves, people, in an idealized scenario, within a community, within a city, they would come together to make an FMTM project and then map their own area. This could also be done by NGOs and other organizations too. So yeah, I hope that gives a bit of insight into FMTM and field mapping.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sam. So again, the tool is in development. You have the URL, and hopefully that gave you a glimpse of how it works. In future sessions, we can go in deep dives based on your interest. But I'm very excited to go into, we're still on this journey, and I think we're getting to the really, I think, exciting part where it starts coming into life. So done a lot of the remote mapping, maybe with help with AI assistance, adding in local knowledge. And now we are going into the next two things of, okay, if this data is being added to OpenStreetMap, how do you download? And then how to go into actually using. So the let's call it end goal or when it all comes to life. So I'll hand over to Emmy now to talk about the map download, tools available, and map use. So over to you, Emmy. Let's see. We still can't hear you, Amy. You are speaking. I'm not sure if you're not able to hear you on the moment. So we'll give it a few seconds just to see if any issues with the mic.
Oh, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes. Yeah.
You bet. Yeah. So, yes, we are approaching to the final steps of this journey. So, uh, one of the main goals of all of this work, why we did all this journey is to use the maps, right? As it says here, the true value of maps lies in their use, transforming geographic data into actionable insights for who need them most. So we have this amazing tool called the export tool, hot export tool, that solves the problem of downloading data from OSM in an easy way. So no more cryptic overpass queries or complex way of downloading data. We can go to export.hotosm.org right now, and we can create an export defining in an area, and then what we want to download from OSM, like roads or buildings or anything. Then we can also, one amazing feature of the export tool is that we can define the format. So maybe we want a GeoJSON, maybe we want a geo package, or even tiles, PM tiles, so we can have the maps offline. And we can download the data from OSM and use it on QGIS or upload it to our own platforms, or also we can download the data to our phones and go to the field with them. So this is really, really useful for a lot of use cases. For example, for the emergency services, for humanitarian responders, is great because you can, for example, download the different places and have them into your phone and in an easy, really easy way. And also you can do data analysis with QGIS or with other tools very easily using the export tool. And also we are publishing some data to like some prepare exports to HDX, that is the Humanitarian Data Exchange Platform from OCHA. You can find there, for example, destroyed buildings after the Turkey earthquake in different formats, ready to be downloaded. And we also update datasets like buildings, roads, and other important and useful datasets for different countries. And recently, we are also started to make this data available to via a government platform. That is the case of the. Can you please, Petia, go to the the next slide? Sorry, there was. Okay. Okay. Don't worry. So yeah, we are publishing also data into the Mexican government platform. So that is the other place. So we are starting to also offer data in other platforms that is not only the export tool. Yes, that was those were the screenshots. Thank you. And so yeah, export tool is free to use. You can go to export.hotsm.org and export your data. And this is the data that you created on all the previous steps, right? All the buildings that you mapped when you did remote mapping, and then you complete the map with the help of the AI tools with FAIR, and then you enrich this data with FMTM, with the Field Map Task Manager. All of that data that goes to OSM, you can download it from the export tool. The final step is the final goal, that is the using the map. And that is the final reason of doing all of this, to make use of all of this data. What is the next slide? Yeah. Yeah, so here, for example, we see an example of data that we downloaded from hot export tool, and our buildings, and the data is combined with, in this case, with the area affected by a disaster, that it was a wildfire. This is a real wildfire, and these are buildings from a town near my home. And you can make these kind of things very easy. And next slide, please.
Those were, yeah.
Yes, this is the, and now we have a tool that is like kind of a small version of QGIS, something like that, because it enables the use of the creation of maps and the use of the data that the map data that we created before, but in the web online. This is UMAP. We created an instance of UMAP that is available on umap.hotsm.org. If you go there, you can create a map very easy. It's available for everyone. You don't even need an account, but you can create an account using your OpenStreetMap account. And there you can put all your data together. Even the aerial imagery that you collected at the first step of the journey with Drone Task Manager, for example, and then you publish this aerial imagery to Open Aerial Map, you can visualize it here. It's very easy. You just choose the background and it will be there. The aerial background and it will be there. And also you have other map background options like OpenStreetMap and S3 like with the satellite imagery and other options. You can even put your own link for having a different background. And on top of this, you can put other data like field data that you collected in the field that is not maybe OSM data, but is, for example, number of people living in a house. And also you can upload geometries like the area affected by a disaster or area that is in risk, or even during the disaster, you can use this map and mark in the map, for example, houses that were evacuated or have to be evacuated, or any other kind of data that you want. And you can also integrate other sources. For example, you can, if you have a service that provides you with areas that are in risk or are affected by about something, for example, wildfires, you can also create this connection between UMAP and that other data source. And you can create a lot of different visualizations and stories. You can also create heat maps, and you have a lot of options available for customizing the look and feel of these maps. So you can put all the data together and make use of it. If we go to the next slide, we can have some also more examples of this. This was during an exercise that we did where we did all this journey from flying drones to having the final map with all data together, and we did a disaster drill. This was a supposed wildfire, and during that day we used UMAP to update in real time the progress of this supposed disaster, marking the area affected by it, putting all the buildings there with the data that we collected from the field, like materials, construction materials for the houses, and also the location of people that were working on this drill and in this supposed disaster. And here we see, this is a final example that I have for you. This was a real wildfire that happened here. I live close to that green mark that you see in the screen, and was the burned area of this wildfire. And in this case, we also added videos to the map. So you can also add videos or pictures to this map to complement all the data that you collected on all the previous steps. And recently, also, we are experimenting with WhatsApp. So we have a way to get data from WhatsApp chats, and we are using UMAP again to combine that data collected from WhatsApp with pictures and messages into a single map that have as a background, again, all the data that was collected on the previous steps of this journey.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. And I think it's great to end by looking at some maps. I'll share as well what Amy just mentioned about the WhatsApp location parser. Have a quick look if you're interested. So thank you. I know it's been an hour and we've managed to hold most of you in this session. We have another 25 minutes. But I just wanted to recap. I know it was quite a bit of information from talking about the different gaps that are being addressed, from imagery all the way to visualizing and having the maps and the examples that we saw as well from Emmy. So the main aim really today was just to give you that overview, give you a little kind of snippet of like first why it matters, why we're focusing on this work, why it's so important to have accessible and open source tools to enable that work. And we'll have another session I'll talk about where you can select and, understand which area maybe is most relevant to your work you can really benefit from. So I'd love to still keep you involved and get back into Menti again. So you're also part of this engagement. So there'll be a few questions that you can add in there. You'll see we have 3 questions, I think, added. And then we have time for more of a discussion. But if you can all go back to maybe if somebody can reshare again the link, it is the same link. So I'll just share my screen here, present. Okay, so let's see who's joined us. Who's still still hopefully the brains are not too fried with the information and you're joining here. Okay, 4 people. I'm sure we can get more involved just to see, like you've heard quite a bit. So, at the beginning we talked about what were the gaps, talked about different tools. And let's see, just move to the next one. My first 2 questions, they're not a quiz, but they're more about, maybe you heard about some tools. I'll give you examples, but okay, thank you, Omran, for sharing the link again. I'll give it maybe 30 seconds just to see if there are more people who's joining us. Thank you, Omran, for sharing the link. So please join in the Menti if you're still okay. So here, I just wanted to see, we mentioned some tools that we as a hot tech team and with the community working on, but there's so many. So, and it's often confusing with the abbreviation. So let's see, field mapping data collection. Great, FMTM learned about with FAIR, part of it as well. Kobo, yeah, interesting. Yeah, Kobo coming a bit. Mapillary, oh, notebook. I don't know what that is. Tasking mapillary, great. So this is not a, right or wrong. I think I'll show you in a second, maybe a page on our website I'm going to share now that gives you an idea of some of the tools we just presented. But what I wanted to mention is that there are different tools, right? Available. So we've obviously given you an idea of some of those tools. I'll just share one link. Okay, great. I'm gonna go to the next one. So it's a bit of a quiz, but it's not a right answer, there are many answers, and I think that's what we're saying here. And that's some of the mobile apps as well coming in. And again, I think as part of this journey, there isn't like a split as well. Like when I say field mapping. Okay, great that we have good participation. So how about maybe that's more difficult in broad terms, right? One was the collecting the data. Now we're talking about analysis, visualization, use, some of maybe the tools you've heard towards the end, or there's QGIS. Yeah, I like that at the very start of the session we had QGIS and it's coming again. I'll share one link with you as well as we speak about this. ArcGIS, OSM chat, Folium. Okay, I'll share a link with you. But what I wanted to kind of highlight here is hopefully you've learned, maybe you're new to some of the tools we've mentioned that would allow you to go through this journey, through this open mapping journey. And also there are different tools, there are other tools. What's like really key and what Ivan started is making it possible for everyone. So thinking more of like the equality and participation of different communities. So UMAP, yeah, I'll be happy to see some we've just presented as well. Tableau, yeah, other systems. Okay, I've shared one link. Let me just show you very quickly in the link that I shared in the chat, gives you an idea when we talk about open data solutions in each one of those areas that you can see. Go to see, sorry, somebody's unmuted. What other tools are there and available? Not sure if you. So in here, do you see my screen? I'm not sure. Okay, great.
Yeah.
You, Emmy, for highlighting. So this is just again to highlight, following this journey, following some of these steps, you can see different tools. Okay, so going back to the next question on the Menti, and I hope you're still staying with us. I think I have two more questions that you've heard a lot of information. And we talked about gaps at the start, right? So we talked about gaps, and some people said it's around data collection, maybe it's around imagery. We've maybe addressed some of those gaps, maybe not, but what are the main challenges? So those are really the things we want to hear from you, your encounter. So learning to use so I'm hoping in the next follow-on kind of hands-on session, that's one of the aims we have, to split you into groups and be able to data scarcity, updated, lack of data, and incomplete data. So there's some areas around quality, talking about getting the imagery. So a lot of, I think, the work around drone TM as well, finding high resolution imagery, just trying to look at some of the patterns, because I know you talked about gaps at the start of the Menti, and then we can see here. I don't think on quality we have talked in detail, but maybe that's something that we can also mention as some of the reflections. So I see some themes, around imagery that we've talked about. Okay, I also see something around, I think, the needs that you want to understand better all these tools, but fitting all these tools together, yeah. I'll go into a second into the next slide, because maybe you have ideas of how we can better explain that to you, this journey and the connection of those tools. Lack of consistent, yeah. Okay. So I'm seeing here some things that maybe we could support in addressing. Okay. So this relates a bit to the previous one. You talked about the challenges. I'm not going to say that they each one fit into each one of those boxes, but mainly getting a sense of which ones maybe we focus on more, you'd like to learn more about. So it could be about the tools and how they're enabled, or maybe you need more support, like people mentioned, around kind of training, and maybe it's more the kind of community element of it. Yeah, I'd love your participation here. Which part would you like to learn more, in broad terms? So obviously in each of these areas, there are different tools that can be used. AI-assisted mapping. Okay. I'm glad that on all areas there is some some response. Would you like to learn more about? Okay, some about, yeah, imagery can also be, again, with open aerial map, I mentioned very briefly. I think there were some questions there that we can briefly speak about. Yeah, AI-assisted mapping, data visualization. Yeah, I think it's true that mainly even the webinars that I've led and participated have, a lot of them focus quite a bit on the kind of first part of this journey. So interesting to see that kind of the more the need on also visualization. Okay, another 10 seconds, and I'll go into the next slide, which will be practically, you can give us ideas of what you'd like to do more. Okay. I think visualization is the most exciting, right? Putting things into life. And I feel like we've not done much on this topic, so we'll listen to your input. Okay. And the last slide is, before I go into next steps, is what ideas do you have maybe there's something. So some of you said we want to learn more about the two. So our aim for the next session in 11th of December is to split you into groups and focus on different parts. So maybe if it is about visualization and you want to learn more about UMAP or how to export the data, those are things that we can focus on more. Different data sources. So any ideas? I'll keep this open for a few more, maybe for like a minute or so, because we really want to plan the next session based on your input. So you talked about gaps, you talked about areas you'd like to focus on and learn a bit more, that we'll review, and other ideas. How we can map the underworld, yeah. Data collection and making maps. If there are any other reflections from tech team or speakers, feel free to also jump in. Learning how to create your field collection servers with digital. Example. Okay, examples of tools used in projects. I shared one link actually, and I would recommend in this link that I mentioned, Open Data Solutions. They're like 3 blogs. Maybe I'll share my screen as well in here to see, because I really think from the speakers that you heard now, from Ivan and from Ramya and Sam, Emmy, they have a few blogs where they're talking about that whole open mapping solution and that journey in the places where the activities took place. I think Nepal, Argentina. Incomplete. Okay, hands-on trainings on all tools. Okay, I'm gonna stop maybe here. I'll move back to the slides just to talk about next steps and any questions if people have. Can you see the slide now again? Maybe somebody can give me a thumbs up or so. So here I'll keep this for a bit about the next session. I know this was a lot of information, and I talked quite a bit. We've gathered a bit of information from you of what you would like to do next, and I think we can plan sessions around this, of maybe some 2 specific trainings, more deep dives based on that. But I do hope, the main thing that we'd love is for you to stay in touch. If that was an introduction, if that was something new, that you know how to stay connected and and reach out. You heard already from the people mainly working on some of those tools. So yeah, please, I'll keep this for a second, and we have probably maybe I'll stop sharing. Just a second. So do people have any questions? I know it was a lot of information, but we have probably 10 minutes before. So do you have any questions that you'd like to unmute and ask as we wrap? Just give it an. How do I join the working group? Let me. I'll just share that in a second. So all the working groups. See, I'll share a link here on this side. You can see any questions. We have 10 minutes. If you need to drop out, feel free to do that. If you have specific questions as well, you can add in the chat. Great, thank you so much. If anyone wants to wave, like show their camera and say before they switch off. How do you officially join? So there isn't there's a way for you to join different working groups, which I've shared the link now for you. And you can join Slack, which Samara has just done. I will share with everyone after this session the slides, so you have access to all the links and all the different tools. Yeah, so working groups, you can join Slack, you can email us, as we saw on the last slide. Thank you so much. Any other questions, anyone? I know it's a long session, so I'm happy if we wrap up a bit earlier, but I want to make sure you have the space to ask any questions that you have, any feedback as well. All right. Thank you. Feel free to, or type in the chat. Recording. I will share. We need to upload the recording, so I'll make sure because the live YouTube streaming didn't work. There's a technical error. We will upload it likely tomorrow. I would say it's not going to be today. I have everyone who's registered. I have your emails, so I will email the recording. Can you explain briefly how I can mobilize people to map using Tasking Manager? For example, I need to use a building data set for a town in Somalia, which I found on XDX for the products. What is the first thing? Do you want to answer that, Rami, or shall I start about the Tasking Manager and like mobilizing, maybe setting up projects and how that works in the chat?
Let's go for it better. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. So again, feel free to stay if you have questions. We'll just address some questions. If you need to drop off, huge thanks. So on the Tasking Manager, the way that it works is you set projects and there are organizations registered. And I'm not sure, maybe the team can help me if there's like an organization registered in Somalia. And basically identifying the areas that you would want to map, setting that project. And then I'm not sure if the question is like, how do you bring people together to coordinate, to map all together? I found a few buildings. Yeah, so the process would be actually first setting that project. I think, Heba, if you are, you can also drop us an email. So to be able to add you to the Tasking Manager. But the way it works is, I will just mute notifications coming in, is you need to register on the Tasking Manager, and it works via organizations normally. But we can also, as HOT, support the setting up for that, if I'm correct, Ramya. So if you're not like a representative, depending on that project. So on this one, I think, Heba, maybe because you have a specific case actually for, Rami, you've answered my question. I should read. OSM Somalia is registered on the Tasking Manager. So maybe that could be an option for setting a project for that specific area. And in terms of like the mobilizing people, there are different ways. I think, I know with a lot of the OpenStreetMap communities sometimes also organize like something called like a mapathon where everyone gets, in the virtual space, maybe even on Zoom, and you all map at the same time. But let me add my email as well. Does that answer your question, Heba? I'll just add my email again because you can I can connect you to Rami and also Sam from our from HOT who might be able to connect you. Okay. Anything? And what about the data intern? Has it been posted? Oh, good question. Data quality internship. I am not aware of having another round of it. I think people who've been involved with HOT for some time would know that there was a data quality interns, like a few rounds. But the moment it's not taking place. I don't know more on it. Unfortunately, Emmanuel, I know it was it was a great program and we've done some training sessions. Okay, thank you, Heba. Feel free to drop us an email and we'll make sure that's connected. I'm just reading through the other comments. If anyone wants to ask a question directly, let us know. So we have, how can I, as a member of HOT? Okay, so we have some of the gurus joining us, Bayezid. many ways to contribute. So I think it again depends on like what your interests or maybe background. Like if you want to start mapping, you can pick a project, maybe also on the tasking manager and contribute. I think a good way would be what we mentioned, joining Slack and starting from there. If you're interested in more kind of, if I'm not sure of your background, but if you're doing software development or more on the kind of tech side of things, there are also other ways in which you can learn more about the tools and contribute in that way. Please respond and let me know if I've answered your questions right, and if not, I can. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. I'm just checking what else is here. Okay, most of us as students. Okay, so you have a few students joining us in usage and running of spatial analysis using the available data. What will you recommend to begin with? I don't know, Emmy, would you be, I'm thinking of like, because spatial analysis is quite broad, but like, what's the first step? Like whether is it with starting with export or maybe something else on that?
Yes, yes, you can actually play with exporting data from export tool.
Mhm.
And of course the best tool for doing this kind of analysis is QGIS. QGIS maybe look like it have a lot of options, so it looks like overwhelming at the beginning. But if you start with simple things, I think you can learn a lot. QGIS is great. UMAP is more like for most basic things, and the cool thing is that you can also create you can do a data analysis in QGIS and publish it in UMAP, like the results of that. So yeah, I think that could be the way.
Yeah, different tools. I think if you're not familiar, it's like hard to say, but we shared a bit on export to maybe starting QGIS we haven't covered, but again, maybe one to look into. I hope, Wilfred, that answers your question. And then the last one I'm reading here is working. So from Dennis Kasozi on a project where you use drone imagery and it's good. Well, that's great. I wonder, yeah, it looks like you're actually, however, some buildings that have just been built. Oh, I'm not sure I am following this one, or it's more of an update of like using drone imagery. Um, so it's I'm not sure, Dennis, what the question is there, or it's more the change with like when you're using drone imagery, and obviously like buildings change. Sorry if that's a question or it's more of an update, Dennis, but I'm glad that you're finding drone imagery useful. If anyone understands or wants to add more, let me know. Yes, Dennis, yeah. Great. I'm not sure if that was a hand. Yeah. If it is specific to, great. Thank you for adding links and sharing more information. All right. Well, I think I would say that's a wrap. Thank you for joining. Hope you've learned more, and it was helpful for us to hear from you on some input for the following sessions. And yeah, by the end of the week, I'll share all the resources. There were some specific actions for your Heba, feel free to reach out to us, and then some different training sessions and working groups shared in the chat. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your days. Thanks so much to the speakers, to Sam, Rami, Ivan, Omran, and Emmy for presenting. So yeah, have a great rest of your day. And huge thanks to Ivan for waking up at 4 a.m. Thank you, Ivan. All right. Thank